Good evening, Philippines, and good day, world. It's Saturday, January 6, 2024, and you're watching Newsline World. I'm Kristel Guangco, and we'll bring you the top stories we've gathered from all over the globe. Philippines' inflation rate has slowed down in December of last year. The second wave of documents linked to the disgraced financier convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein has been unsealed. ISIS claims responsibility for the powerful twin blast that rocked Iran and killed dozens of people. U.S. warns Ukraine that its support for the war-torn country may decrease. And an Australian region reopens for tourism as it recovers from the devastating cyclone that wreaked havoc in the area. This and more for tonight's edition of Newsline World. First in our news, the Philippines has seen a slowdown in the overall inflation rate in December 2023, but certain commodities, particularly rice, experienced price hikes. Jason Rubico reports.
The upward trajectory of price increases has decelerated. According to the Philippine Statistics Authority or PSA, the inflation rate for goods decreased from 4.1% in November to 3.9% in December 2023.
Yung ating inflation 3.9, and of course alam natin na itong year mataas, ano. So this was the slowest since February of 2022, wherein the headline inflation was recorded at 3.0%.
Several factors contributed to the deceleration of inflation, including a faster decrease in the prices of electricity, LPG, vegetables like cabbage, chicken, and coffee. However, consumers and eatery owners did not feel the impact.
Hindi po kasi ang baba naman nila, konti lang, hindi naman ganun bagsakan ng presyo talaga. Lalo na magdi-December, ang manok at saka baboy nagtataasan lahat.
Ramdam niyo po ba?
Hindi ko naramdaman. Mataas pa rin. Araw-araw ko bibili ng gulay, karne. Yung gulay, yung repolyo, bumaba. Pero yung iba, tataas.
While the overall increase in prices of goods has slowed down, certain items like rice have witnessed an increase. The inflation rate for rice surged to 19.6% in December 2023, according to the PSA.
So medyo tumaas ito. Of course, noong September, ito yung unang spike, no? 17.9%, and then bumaba siya noong October to 13.2, November tumaas 15.8, and now December 19.6. The last highest rice inflation ay noong March 2009 na umabot ng 22.9%.
The increase in rice prices prompted eatery owners like Feli to reduce the serving size of rice.
Binabawasan yung takal para kumikita ka sa binta ng bigas ay kanin para may pambili ka ulit ng bigas.
Kasi kapag hindi binawasan yung takal, anong mangyayari, ma'am?
Wala. Lugi ka.
Oo.
Nandun na napupunta yun sa puhunan. Wala na kayong tubo.
Based on PSA monitoring, the prices of rice increased in December 2023 compared to the same period last year.
Nakita namin na medyo mataas talaga yung pag-akyat ng presyo ng bigas sa lahat ng commodity items na tinatrack namin.
The price of rice may see an additional increase in January 2024, according to the Samahang Industriya ng Agrikultura or SINAG, a leading agricultural group in the Philippines. SINAG warned that the price of well-milled rice in the market may increase by 2 pesos per kilogram, ranging from 54 pesos to 56 pesos per kilogram. The reason for this is the increase in the farm gate price of rough rice.
Yung sa farm gate ngayon, tumaas yung farm gate. Ang delivered sa miller is 31.50. So, ang equivalent nun kung palay yun to rice, delivered na, nasa almost 50 pesos na delivered sa Manila. Yung world market kasi ng Thailand at Vietnam tumaas. So, automatic, tataas yung imported, diba?
However, the Department of Agriculture assured that there is no need to worry as the importation of rice continues unabated, totaling 495,000 metric tons.
Sa ngayon, we need to secure talaga yung supply. Alam natin na magkakaroon din ng El Nino, so there will be additional challenge doon sa level natin ng productivity. And we need to ensure na meron tayong enough supply.
For God and my beloved Philippines, I am Jason Rubrico, SMNI News.
In other news, the president of the Union of Local Authorities of the Philippines said that the water management in the country should be properly addressed as it could alleviate the impacts of the El Nino phenomenon. Kristel Guangco reports.
Provinces and local governments are exerting extensive efforts to alleviate the potential effects of El Nino in their respective areas. According to the report from the Philippine Weather Agency, Pag-asa, around 17 locations in the country are expected to be most affected by El Nino. As part of their preparations for the El Nino phenomenon, Union of Local Authorities of the Philippines or ULAP National President and Quirino Governor Dax Cua highlighted their focus on addressing the deficiency in water management.
Alam mo na kasama ko po si Secretary Abalos ng DILG at si Secretary Loizaga po ng DNR at napag-usapan po namin itong tubig, no? At doon sa aming pag-uusap, patuloy po ang paghahanda namin ng mga talakayan para lalong ma-address yung water management.
Cua emphasized that El Nino, as one of the water-related concerns, affects agriculture, food production, water consumption in industries, daily household use, and people's lives. He stressed the importance of properly managing water resources, likening it to Dubai, a desert area where water is efficiently managed to supply the population.
So it's that awareness of how to integrate these management systems in terms of agriculture, industrial use, domestic use, and other uses, and how to recycle some of the water for other purposes, and how to revert the water back to its ecosystem kapag ginamit natin at nilinis na natin.
Cua pointed out that as a country abundant in water resources, the Philippines should improve water management.
Tayo naman po dito, sagana tayo sa tubig. Ang dami nating ilog, pero kulang tayo sa management. Doon po, lalong lalalim ang talakayan ng DILG, DNR, at kasama po ang ULAP at ang mga LGU, mga liga na.
Regarding food production, ULAP President emphasized the importance of irrigation. Currently, the National Irrigation Administration, or NIA, is rolling out programs to develop the associations of irrigators in the country.
Sila na magaganap ng trading, ng mga assistance at training at financial management ng mga farmers natin. So, may empower sila para lalong lumakas ang puwersa ng ating mga rice producers. But again, water management is still key to the success.
Areas of improvement in water management also include the NIA's Sabo Dams project.
Yung value for money mataas, yung gastos mo mas malaki ang return. So, i-divert mo yung tubig papunta sa mga production area, yung mga Sabo Dams na isinusulong.
Meanwhile, Governor Cua expressed his full support for the proposal to establish a department specifically focused on water, particularly on water management. For God and for my beloved Philippines, this has been Kristel Guangco, SMNI News.
The pilots of the Japan Airlines jetliner involved in a collision with a Japanese or Japan Coast Guard aircraft at Haneda Airport in Tokyo have stated that they did not see the Coast Guard plane while touching down on the runway. According to flight control data, there were no signals from the controllers to Japan Airlines or JAL plane to abort its landing. It appears that both the pilots and the flight controllers were unaware of the Coast Guard plane's presence on the runway during the descent of Japan Airlines aircraft. Kyodo News reported that the Japanese Coast Guard aircraft is believed to have stopped on the runway approximately 40 seconds before the accident. Flight control data also indicates that controllers permitted the Japan Airlines jetliner to land on the runway while instructing the Coast Guard plane to head towards a holding point, which caused it to enter the runway, resulting in the collision. To recall, 5 out of 6 occupants of the Coast Guard aircraft died, while all 179 passengers on the Japan Airlines Airbus A350 escaped unharmed and without serious injuries. Meanwhile, the lone survivor, the 39-year-old captain of the Coast Guard aircraft, said he was allowed to enter the runway. Reports say the rear of the Coast Guard plane suddenly brightened. Japan Airlines stated that it has provided all information to Japan's transport authorities investigating the tragic incident on Haneda Airport's runway. Meanwhile, the airline mentioned that the damage to the aircraft amounts to around 15 billion yen, even though it is insured. According to the Japanese Coast Guard, the accident-involved aircraft was en route to Niigata Prefecture to deliver relief supplies to the citizens affected by the magnitude 7.6 earthquake that struck the Noto Peninsula. Meanwhile, a woman was arrested after stabbing several passengers with a knife inside a train in Tokyo, Japan earlier this week. Guy Saito reports.
Passengers inside a running train on Tokyo's Yamanote Loop line went wild with fear after a woman believed to be in her 20s randomly attacked people with a sharp knife. The suspect is believed to have attacked the victims with a knife that was roughly 15 centimeters long, while another sharp weapon was found in her bag. Police said the woman told them she wanted to kill people. 4 men who are in their 30s and 60s were injured in the incident. To recall, a similar incident took place in November 2021 when a 24-year-old man dressed as Joker attacked passengers at Kokura Station in western Tokyo by throwing acid and stabbing people with a knife. At least 17 people were injured from the knife and acid attack. Police are investigating the suspect's identity, while part of the Yamanote Line service has temporarily suspended its operations. Iyo, Saito Gunihongkara, News Asashmashita, SMNI News, Japan.
The Islamic State group claimed responsibility for 2 suicide bombings that killed 84 people in southern Iran. Melchizedek Cadiz files this report.
The bomb attack happened near the gravesite of General Qasim Soleimani in Kerman Martyrs Cemetery in southeastern Iran, while a huge crowd was observing the 4th anniversary of his assassination on Wednesday. Soleimani, who was the commander of the Quds Force of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps and considered the second most powerful person in Iran at that time, was killed by a U.S. drone strike in Baghdad, Iraq in January 2020. The incident angered Iran officials who vowed revenge against Israel. However, Israel and the United States denied their involvement and stated that the strategy used to perform the attack resembled that of the Islamic State or some affiliated Sunni extremist group. The head of Iran's emergency services revised the death toll to 84 on Thursday after several local reports initially announced that the figure exceeded more than 100. The attack injured 284 others. The media wing of ISIS claimed that 2 suicide bombers, who are brothers, have detonated themselves as mourners gathered for the 4th anniversary of the assassination of General Qasim Soleimani. It is said to be the deadliest attack in decades since the 1979 Iranian Revolution, which killed thousands. Reporting this has been Melchizedek Cadiz, SMNI News, Kuwait.
A U.S. drone strike killed a prominent leader of a resistance group in Iraq that Washington blames for the attacks on American forces in the region. Jean Domingo reports.
An airstrike ended the life of an Iranian-backed Shia militia amid rising tensions between Iran's proxies and the United States and the Middle East. The strike killed Mushtaq Jawad Kazim al-Jawari, who was also known as Haji Abu Taqwa, the leader of Harakat Hezbollah al-Nujab, an Iranian-backed paramilitary group active in Syria and Iraq. The Iraqi resistance leader was killed in his car while on his way to visit the group's headquarters in Baghdad. Haji Abu Taqwa had been involved in planning and carrying out attacks on American forces, according to Pentagon. His group, Harakat Hezbollah al-Nujab, has been linked to a series of attacks on U.S. forces in Iraq and Syria. A funeral was held in his honor. Washington designated the group a terrorist organization in 2019. There have been more than 100 attacks by pro-Iranian militias against U.S. forces in Syria and Iraq since Hamas launched a deadly attack on October 7. The drone strike killed the Iraqi resistance leader before U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken visited the Middle East this week. Reporting, this has been Jean Domingo, SMNI News.
In other news, the Israeli Defense Forces said it destroyed a Hamas tunnel under the Al-Shifa hospital and uploaded a 360-degree video of its underground passages on social media. The tunnel branches under Al-Shifa were around 250 meters in length and reached multiple sites used by Hamas in the area. The IDF claims that Hamas has been constructing and developing an extensive network of underground tunnels under Gaza's Shifa hospital for years. These underground passages appear smaller compared to the expansive alleged Hamas command center that Israel had initially declared was beneath Gaza's largest medical center. The IDF destroyed these tunnels after uncovering and documenting them, but said that the hospital buildings above ground were not damaged. The second wave of court documents about the disgraced financier Jeffrey Epstein have been unsealed, and it prompted an online frenzy that crashed a website hosting the said documents. Carlo De La Peña has the details.
More documents related to the sexual abuse of disgraced financier and convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein. The unsealing of these documents fueled an online frenzy and caused a link to immediately crash. Meanwhile, on the second batch, the additional 19 documents, totaling around 300 pages, add to the more than 900 pages of documents that were already unsealed on Thursday. The court documents released on Thursday and Friday documents were part of a 2015 case against Ghislaine Maxwell, Epstein's imprisoned former girlfriend and former British socialite. It also both contain references to ex-US President Bill Clinton and Prince Andrew of the UK. However, the second batch of the unsealed papers does not appear to contain more extensive information about Epstein's trafficking of women and teenage girls. But they include some discussion about the medical records of Epstein accuser Virginia Giuffre and a portion of a deposition given by a medical provider. It also includes a 2011 email exchange between Epstein's accuser, Giuffre, and a former male on Sunday journalist Sharon Churcher. Giuffre claims that Clinton walked into Vanity Fair magazine and threatened them not to write any sex trafficking articles about his good friend Jeffrey Epstein. According to ABC News, Bill Clinton had been named 50 times in the first batch of the unsealed Epstein documents. Clinton was also identified as a John Doe 36 among the nearly 200 names allegedly associated with Epstein. Clinton, Prince Andrew, has denied wrongdoing. Meanwhile, the lawyer of Epstein's ex-girlfriend, Ghislaine Maxwell, argued that Giuffre's efforts were utter nonsense and a transparent ploy to increase media exposure to her sensational stories through deposition sideshow. Others named in the unsealed documents include Alan Dershowitz and a well-known prime minister. All have denied any wrongdoing. These documents were unsealed after New York Judge Loretta Preska ruled in December 2023 that there was no longer any legal justification to withhold the names of the people mentioned in the lawsuit. The full list of names includes Epstein's associates, witnesses, victims, and others incidentally related to the case. But according to Judge Preska, the names of underage victims who did not testify will remain under seal. Jeffrey Epstein was indicted in 2019 on federal charges on operating a sex trafficking ring. He then committed suicide in jail while awaiting trial. Authorities said that the official cause of his death was suicide by hanging. Meanwhile, Maxwell, Epstein's ex-girlfriend and longtime accomplice, was also indicted and convicted in 2022. Reporting, this has been Carlo De La Peña, SM9 News.
Meanwhile, record-breaking temperatures continue to devastate cities throughout Russia. Hence, Marshall will give us the details.
Weather emergencies have been declared across half a dozen regions in Russia amid low temperatures never seen before in the country. Among the most affected areas include Moscow and St. Petersburg, with temperatures dropping to as low as -26 and -27 degrees Celsius respectively. On the other hand, the northern part of Leningrad region saw temperatures as low as -36 degrees Celsius and lows of -35 degrees Celsius were expected on Thursday, and the central regions of Vladimir, Ivanovo, Kostroma, Tver, and Yaroslavl. Sverdlovsk is forecasted to have lows of -40 degrees Celsius. According to the Federal Weather Service, such unusual cold conditions will spread to 70% of the country and will not stop at least before the 10th of January. Meanwhile, due to the weather conditions, air and rail travel across the country have also been affected, with multiple flights being cancelled and rail systems encountering numerous problems. Reporting, this has been Hans Marshall, SMNL News.
South Korea has ordered civilians on an island town to evacuate after North Korea fired hundreds of artillery shells on its west coast. Valdivia Gracia reports.
South Korea told the residents of Yeonpyeong Island to evacuate after North Korea fired around 200 artillery shells off its west coast. Meanwhile, hours later, the Defense Ministry of South Korea described Pyongyang's move as a provocative act and urged it to stop. Seoul also warned that it would take appropriate measures in response. Yeonpyeong Island has a military base and a population of 2,000 people and has witnessed inter-Korean naval clashes over the years. The shell reportedly landed in the maritime buffer zone located north of the Northern Limit Line, or NLL, the de facto maritime border between North and South Korea in the Yellow Sea. The NLL was established under a 2018 agreement between Seoul and Pyongyang, though the latter has since withdrawn from the deal. Meanwhile, Joint Chief of Staff spokesperson Colonel Lee Song-jun said that the South Korean military said it is tracking and monitoring related activity and will conduct corresponding measures to North Korea's provocations. On the other hand, North Korea's state media agency KCNA said that its firing drills off the west coast were a natural response to large-scale military acts by its neighbor. The relationship between the two Koreas continued to deteriorate, and this latest incident comes months after Pyongyang fully suspended a military deal with Seoul that had been aimed at improving relations. To recall, South Korea and the U.S. held joint combat drills on Thursday in Pocheon, near the border with North Korea, to test and enhance combat readiness, simulating enemy aggression. Reporting for Newsline World, this is Valdivia Gracia, SMNI News.
The Secretary General of NATO believes that Sweden will become an official member of the world's largest military alliance by July. Kirby Hill Trinidad has the news.
NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg is confident that Sweden will add its name as the 32nd member of the alliance within the next 7 months. Washington is set to host the next NATO summit from July 9 to 11, and Stoltenberg predicts that the Nordic country will be a full-fledged member by then. Turkey and Hungary remain the only two NATO allies that are yet to fully ratify Sweden's NATO bid, which requires a unanimous decision by all of its member states. To recall, the Turkish Parliament's Foreign Affairs Committee approved Sweden's NATO bid last week, a progress that took place after 19 months of delays. The next step is for the full parliament to vote on the matter before Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan can sign it into law. It was not immediately clear when a parliament vote would be held. Erdogan last week announced that the ratification of Sweden's NATO membership depends on the U.S. Congress approval of Turkey's long-time request to purchase F-16 fighter jets. The Turkish leader also urged Canada and other NATO allies to lift arms embargoes imposed on Turkey to hasten the process. The government of Turkey also called out Stockholm for being too friendly to the Turkish activists that Ankara considers as terrorists. Sweden's membership will pave the way for NATO to further expand the alliance and its surrounding borders near Russia. This has been Kirby Trinidad, SMNI News.
4 people died and dozens of others were injured after 2 trains collided in the Indonesian province of West Java on Friday. More details from Anissa de Guzman.
Less than a week after Indonesia welcomed the new year, a deadly train collision in West Java claimed the lives of 4 people and sent hundreds of passengers into panic. The collision was so intense that the front carriages of both trains were mangled, while the back part of the public transport was badly damaged and overturned. All 4 deaths reported so far involved the train crew. Nearly 500 passengers on board were evacuated to safety on Friday morning. At least 37 of them sustained injuries, according to a spokesperson for PT Kereta Api Indonesia, the country's public railway operator. The collision happened about 500 meters from Cicalengka train station in West Java province earlier today. The cause of the accident was not immediately clear. The Transportation Ministry has offered its condolences and apology to the families of the victim. Reporting for Newsline World, Anissa de Guzman, SMNI News.
In other news, hundreds of people died and thousands more were injured in road traffic accidents during the so-called 7 dangerous days of the New Year holiday. Chapon Campus sa Magasan reports.
At least 284 people died and more than 2,300 people were injured from road accidents in Thailand between December 29, 2023 until Thursday, January 4, 2024.
The said days are the so-called 7 dangerous days of the New Year holiday in Thailand. A total of 2,288 traffic accidents nationwide were recorded during this period. The figure was slightly lower compared to the death toll last year, which saw 317 deaths and 2,437 injuries. Meanwhile, the number of road accidents recorded during this period was 2,440. Recent research showed that the main causes of road accidents in Thailand are speed violation, human error, and illegal overtaking.
The most recent global report published by the World Health Organization in 2023 ranked Thailand as the number 9 country with the highest road traffic death rate. รายงานจากราชบุรี นายชัดมงคลวิสมัยโกศล SMN News ประเทศไทย สวัสดีครับ
SMNI's lawyers have sought the inhibition of the 3 officials of the National Telecommunications Commission, or NTC, handling the network's case. According to them, SMNI will have no hope of justice if the NTC officials who filed the complaint against the network will serve as the judge and likewise the executioner. Jason Rubico reports.
The Sunshine Media Network International, or SMNI, requested the removal of 3 officials of the National Telecommunications Commission, or NTC, from handling the administrative case that they also filed against the network. This was after the presence of SMNI lawyers Attorney Mark Tolentino and Attorney Rolex Suplico at the NTC hearing this Thursday morning related to the 30-day preventive suspension and issuance of the show cause order. Tolentino and Suplico are seeking to inhibit NTC Commissioner Ella Blanca Lopez and 2 Deputy Commissioners John Paulo Salvajan and Alvin Bernard Blanco. The lawyers stressed that the independence and impartiality of the said officials is questionable because they filed a complaint against SMNI. They will also be the ones who will litigate, and they will be among those who will decide the fate of the network. Suplico and Tolentino said that in this kind of setup, there will be no justice for SMNI.
In this case, sila ang complainant, sila ang judge. So how can we expect justice? And part of due process is a cold neutrality of an impartial judge. And second, not only impartial but must appear to be impartial.
Parang judge yan na nag-file ng kaso at ang kaso nasa korte niya. May laban ba ka doon? In short, we cannot expect justice from the NTC in this case. The NTC is the judge, the NTC is the complainant, the NTC is the executioner. We cannot expect justice from the NTC.
The lawyers added that it is not clear what complaint or violation was committed by the SMNI to be suspended by the NTC.
Walang complaint, hindi nga namin alam kung anong violation para masagot namin. So that's why we are studying anong mga possible na pleadings na i-file namin.
On December 21 of 2023, the NTC suspended the SMNI's operation on radio and television. This was after the House passed the resolution filed by PBA Party List Representative Margarita Nograles, urging the NCC to suspend the network due to alleged violations, something that for SMNI is unacceptable, especially since the network was not given the opportunity to explain and respond to the NTC's show cause order before the suspension was imposed. After the NTC issued a show cause order for the network, it immediately issued a suspension order that is immediately executory. It appears that even before the NTC's hearing on the allegations, it issued an immediate punishment to the network. SMNI lawyers recently went to the Court of Appeals to complain about the NTC. The network filed a certiorari with an attached appeal asking the CA to issue a temporary restraining order and preliminary injunction to stop the implementation of the suspension order. At the time that the 3 NTC officials inhibit, it is possible that the case will be referred to the Department of Justice. In the event that NTC rejects SMNI's motion, this is the response of the lawyers.
We will file the possible pleading, maybe we will file a motion for consideration and go to the higher court for on the ground that there's grave abuse of discretion amounting to lack or excess of jurisdiction.
Alam mo, parang wala naman ako nakikita na hindi sila mag-inhibit eh. Kasi it's right here, staring in your face. Kitang-kita eh. Hindi ko nga malaman kung bakit hindi nila napansin ito. Ito, korte, NTC, complainant, NTC.
The lawyers emphasized again that what the NTC is doing may have a chilling effect on other journalists in the country. For God and my beloved Philippines, I am Jason Rubrico, ASM9 News.
The National Security Council responded to the comments of China when it said that the Maritime Patrol of the Philippines, together with the United States in the West Philippine Sea, was provocative. Francine Sagarino has the details.
Tensions continue to remain high with regard to the issue on the West Philippine Sea after Beijing described the Philippine-U.S. Maritime Patrol in the area as a provocative military action. According to the Foreign Ministry spokesperson Wang Wenbin, the Philippines and the United States carried out the provocative military moves in the South China Sea for the purpose of showing off their force. Wang also said that the move is not conducive to the management and control of maritime situations and disputes related to the waters there, and urged relevant countries to stop what Beijing calls as irresponsible actions and honestly respect the efforts of regional countries to maintain peace and stability in the South China Sea. In response, the National Security Council, NSC, pointed out that the drills were done the Exclusive Economic Zone, or EEZ, of the Philippines and were in accordance to consistent international law. In a statement, NSC advisor Eduardo Años said, "The Philippines is merely exercising its sovereign right to engage in such activities within its territory, and these exercises are aimed at enhancing our maritime capabilities and interoperability with the U.S." He added that the joint maritime activities showed the Philippines and its allies' mutual commitment to a rules-based international order and to promoting peace and stability of the region. It can be noted that military exercises in the area are not uncommon, with China's Navy also having conducted routine drills in late November. Reporting, this has been Francine Segarino, SMNI News.
In other news, the federal government of Australia and the state of Queensland announced a $5 million tourism recovery package designed to attract tourists back to far north Queensland. The region is still recovering from the devastating impact of a severe tropical cyclone that caused millions of dollars in damages and canceled millions worth of tourism bookings. Ruth Hamilton reports.
The trail of destruction left behind by Cyclone Jasper is still fresh from memory as recovery efforts continue in far north Queensland. Residents are still reeling from the aftermath of the tropical storm, but the state government is willing to kickstart tourism to aid the region's economic recovery. Former tropical cyclone Jasper weakened from a Category 2 system into a tropical storm when it entered Queensland in mid-December. Even though it has weakened into a tropical storm, it took the system almost 5 days to move west across Queensland, leaving behind a trail of destruction that devastated communities. Cairns, a city in tropical far north Queensland, witnessed its worst flooding in more than 100 years, with records that have even exceeded the flooding in 1977. The severe weather discouraged tourists from visiting the region during peak season and canceled more than $270 million worth of visitor bookings. The $5 million tourism recovery package is the federal and state government's attempt to attract tourists back to far north Queensland after the impact of the destructive storm. Several parts of Australia ended 2023 with a series of bushfires, flooding, heavy rains, hail, and thunderstorms as recovery efforts continue. This is Ruth Hamilton, SM9 News.
A court in Argentina suspended the proposed labor reforms by the newly elected president of the South American country. The decision took place more than a week after protesters took to the streets of Buenos Aires to oppose sweeping economic reforms presented by their new leader. Natalia Prado files this report.
Judges in Argentina suspended President Javier Milei's proposed labor law changes that are part of the sweeping economic reforms to revive the country's struggling economy. The sweeping economic changes were introduced by Milei after he took office last month. The reforms include an increased probation period from the previous 3 to 8 months, lower compensation payments for the dismissed employees, and shorter pregnancy leave credits. Trade unions had challenged the changes and argued that they undermine the basic protection for workers, such as parental leave and their right to strike. To recall, thousands of Argentines filled the city streets of Buenos Aires more than a week ago to protest the new president's proposed economic reforms. Fresh demonstrations were witnessed on Wednesday night, where protesters brought with them pots, pans, and sticks to make noises in a movement they called cacerolazos. Reporting from Newsline World, this has been Natalia Prado, SMNI News.
The Russia-Ukraine conflict grinds on and will enter the second year this month. But recently, the United States warned Ukraine that it may not continue the same levels of support for the war-torn country. Jane Cognita reports.
The United States promised that it will support Ukraine for as long as it takes. But now the U.S. said Ukraine must ultimately become able to defend itself on its own. In a recent briefing, U.S. State Department spokesperson Matthew Miller said that the level of U.S. military funding may ultimately weaken, particularly when Kyiv becomes able to stand on its own 2 feet. But Miller warned that the U.S. military funding for Ukraine will dry up at some point, but that moment has yet to arrive.
We have always made clear that we want Ukraine to be an independent country, and that means that can stand on its own 2 feet. We will continue to support Ukraine. It is the policy of the United States.
As long as it takes?
As long as it takes. That does not mean that we are going to continue to support them at the same level of military funding that we did in 2022 and 2023. We don't think that should be necessary because the goal is to ultimately transition Ukraine, to use the language that you repeated back to stand on its own feet and to help Ukraine build its own industrial base and its own military industrial base so it can both finance and build and acquire munitions on its own. But we are not there yet.
According to Miller, it was critical for the U.S. Congress to adopt the supplementary funding bill for Ukraine as it's most pressing for Kyiv and other Western backers. To recall, the U.S. Congress shelved the said bill late last year, postponing discussions for after the holiday break after failed negotiations. Meanwhile, Pentagon spokesperson Major General Ryder noted that the U.S. is simply out of money unless lawmakers pass a new aid package for Ukraine. He explained that the Pentagon is authorized to spend another $4.2 billion on weapons for Kyiv, but the actual funds are not available, and it must be set aside by the U.S. Congress.
Without having the replenishment funds in order to actually replenish our own funds. It's the authority to spend, but not necessarily the funds available. Thus, we need the supplemental from Congress.
Okay, so you don't actually have $4.2 billion in...
We have the authority to spend that from available funds, but wouldn't have the ability to replenish the stocks by taking money out or taking stuff out of our...
Ryder's remarks came after Ukrainian Foreign Minister Dmytro Kuleba told CNN that Ukraine had no plan B without American military assistance. Kuleba said, and quote, "We don't have a plan B. We are confident in plan A. Ukraine will always fight with the resources given to it. And what is given to Ukraine is not charity. It's an investment in the protection of NATO and in the protection of the prosperity of the American people." Meanwhile, the European Union, another major backer of Ukraine, is also facing struggles after Hungary late last year vetoed the planned 4-year scheme worth $55 billion. Hungary's decision to block the EU's funding for Ukraine pushed deliberations into 2024. Reporting, this has been Jane Cognita, SMNI News.
And before we end, may we be inspired with the message of the appointed Son of God. What your faith can conceive, you can achieve. that's all for this edition. For more news update, you may visit s9newschannel.com or follow us on our official social media accounts on Rumble, YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter. Thank you for watching, and we thank our beloved pastor, Pastor Apollo C. Kibuloy, for the opportunity to be part of this program. For God and my beloved country, the Philippines, I'm Kristel Guangco, and this is Newsline World.